I don't know if you heard that thunder, but that's what's going on in the background today in Denver, Colorado. The skies are gray, it's raining, the leaves are coming out. It's a beautiful spring day. God is giving us a gift of nurture. So you'll hear the thunder and perhaps the rain in the background. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. You're at the edge of a cliff, not a metaphorical one, but a real one. You're on vacation. You're standing at the top of this breathtaking overlook. You're surrounded by friends who just have jumped off into the deep blue below. Now they're safely roped by a guided rappel. They're going to make it to safety, and they're whooping it up. They are laughing. They feel alive. You're frozen. Every part of you wants to join them, but your mind is screaming, nope, not safe, not today, no way. That's your mind doing exactly what it was programmed to do, to protect you. But sometimes protection comes at the price of participation. This is a rethink moment. Hi friends, welcome back to the Rethink Podcast. I'm Dr. David Zierk. In this episode, we're taking a deeper dive into the stories that we tell ourselves about safety and connection and growth, and where those stories actually come from. We're going to try to unpack why we do what we do, and why we do could be something different. Why we do what we do could be very different than what other people do. At the same time, in the same circumstances. We're pulling from the first two chapters of my book, Mind Rules. So I'm going to be pulling it up on the screen. Mind Rules. Who's in control, you or your mind? This podcast is pulling first two mind rules. And we're going to be peeling back these protective layers of the brain. And we're going to show you why your mind isn't built to prioritize relationships or even happiness. Its job is survival. Your job is to step out of survival mode and really back into the life that you really need, want, desire, and deserve. Today, we'll explore two fundamental truths. Number one, your mind is not relational. It's protective. Number two, your mind is not neutral. It's self-serving. So, like I said, I had the privilege of writing and publishing a book called Mind Rules. Let me tell you one thing that writing a book reveals about an author. It reveals and exposes neuroticism. Neuroticism is attention to details that may not matter to anybody else, but somehow, for some reason, to you right here, right now, it matters a great deal. You're neurotically attached to a specific detail. Now, the one detail I got really attached to, connected to, obsessively so, was the first line of the book. Now, if you ask yourself, how many books have you read in your life? How many of those books do you recall the first line? Now, your answer is probably not many, but perhaps a few. Maybe the Bible. In the beginning, God created. I remember Moby Dick when it was, my name is Ishmael. In college, I was really deeply into existential philosophy. I was reading authors like Albert Camus. He had a book called The Stranger. And the first line of his book was, Mother died today. It stuck. One other title of a book and first line of a book that stuck was Rick Warren's A Purpose-Driven Life. He's a pastor in California, wrote a very popular book called The Purpose-Driven Life. Kind of like the steps to get into heaven. I guess that was a spoiler alert. But the first line of his book is amazing. It says it's not about you. And I think that one line and that one line only speaks heavenly to what it means to be religious and spiritual, regardless of your choice. So, give you an idea. That's how my mind works. I really wanted a good first line. Mind rules. Who's in control, you or your mind? The first line of the book is, imagine a world without rules. I like to think that the reader of my book pauses for just a moment, maybe a microsecond, and thinks about that. Because when you do pause and think about a world without rules, I'm sure where your thoughts go, you would say it would be chaos, it would be mayhem. That's the reason why we have rules of the road. It's the reason why we have rules of decorum. Kind of keeps humanity in check. So we need rules. When I got the privilege of writing a book, I started writing about relationship intelligence, turning conflict into connection. And as I was writing that book, which is not yet finished, I paused because I had to ask myself, in order to teach people to be relationally intelligent, I really do believe it was fundamentally important, vital, for them to know how the mind works so they can get a better understanding of how their mind works. So I paused and reflected and asked, how does the mind work? I didn't have a good answer. I mean, here I am with advanced education, decades worth of experience from a clinical perspective. I'm a forensic psychologist, and I really didn't have a good understanding or grasp on how the mind works. So I started noodling on that idea. Certainly, I read the research on it. I came up with this concept of the mind works based on these implicit, unspoken rules. The mind is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. The subtitle to the book, Mind Rules, is Who's in Control, You or Your Mind? And it's kind of letting the cat out of the bag, if you will, because if we only let the mind do what it's supposed to be doing, oftentimes we'll lead a very constricted, small, safe life. In a sense, the mind loves phraseology like better safe than sorry. But like my introduction said, that if you place protection ahead of participation, you may not be leading a life full of meaning, full of memories, where it fills you with a sense of satisfaction. It makes life worth living. So the mind is designed to protect you from harm, but at the same time, it can also shield you from growth. Let me bring this into action. I want to introduce to you Todd and Rachel. So as you read Mind Rules, you'll see that there's different people in the book who, throughout different chapters, kind of really are exposés of these different mind rules. And Todd and Rachel has to do with the idea that the mind is not relational. They made a bold move and they decided to move overseas. Now, Todd and Rachel were this kind of couple that were always meant to be together. They were both professionals. They loved outdoors living. They loved adventures. And they were really good at making memories together. And that's the reason why they came up with this idea of moving abroad. New life, new scenery, new opportunities. And that's exactly what they did. So in a sense, everyone thought that Todd and Rachel would live happily ever after. And they were doing that. They were walking the walk. And then Rachel had a very interesting awakening one day. Now you'll read the book and you'll see why this awakening came about. But she came upon a desire she didn't think she would ever have. She wanted a child. Now, Todd and Rachel, professionals, adult relationships, living life to the fullest, had a spoken deal. Let's not have children. That's great. They were enjoying their nieces and nephews. They were enjoying their friends' kids. And life was really good. They just made that deal. And then all of a sudden, something inside of Rachel shifted. And her mind became alarmed, uncertain, warning signs flashing everywhere. What should she do with this truth? Now, I don't know if she believed in it just yet, but it felt real. But she knew about the deal that she made with Todd. So she chose to be silent, keep it to herself for weeks. And then finally, it got to a threshold level, and it didn't go away. It didn't dissipate. It didn't diminish. It got stronger. She wanted a child. So she decided to step into it. So before that, who is in control, you or your mind? Rachel's mind was doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Keep it to yourself. Don't rock the boat. Be grateful for what you have. But this growing destiny within her got to the point where it became so big she couldn't hold it to herself. So she shared it with Todd. Now, Todd's mind, same story. He's steeped in his upbringing, full of messages of risk and control. He didn't know how to receive that. And because he didn't have a place to put that, he didn't receive it with open arms. He paused, perhaps too long. And Rachel took that as rejection. So that was her internalized program working. Remember, the mind is not relational. The mind is self-protective. Instantaneously, Rachel went to a place of self-protection. She felt rejected, dismissed, if you will. She knew Todd was a great guy. She knew about the deal that they made long ago. But this felt different. So as their story unfolds in Mind Rules, we watch what happens when they choose to lead with conscience, not follow what their mind tells them to do. For Todd, he was going to follow his programming. He's very rational, very analytical, very stoic. He was basically going to fall back onto the idea that we had a deal. Rachel was overriding some of her programming, going into these newfound instincts of hers and not knowing what to do. You'll read in the book about how they reconciled this, but instead of following what their mind is doing, they got out of their mind. They decided to lead with conscience, with dialogue, try to create shared meaning. And that's the power of rethinking. Stepping into uncertainty with self-awareness, not self-protection. Stepping into self-awareness, not self-protection. Do you understand how in order to step into self-awareness without self-protection, you have to, in a sense, unplug the mind. You have to be aware of what your mind is doing and basically say, pause. I want to have a different dialogue. I want to see where this was going. I want to have an open mind to this new opportunity. So let's bring this idea into the workplace. Picture a team member who has an idea for a new client service. It's untested, it's bold, it's unconventional. She's energized by the possibility, but her mind goes into overdrive. She starts thinking, what if I fail? What if I'm wrong? What if I lose credibility with the staff? So instead of sharing the idea, she stays quiet. She stayed safe. This is what happens when the mind focuses on self-preservation. Better safe than sorry? It's not a bad life philosophy. I'm not sure where it gets you. So she began to challenge her instincts. And she began leading with intention instead of inhibition. She opened the door to innovation and she spoke. Now, maybe her ideas need to be refined. But now, as a result of taking that risk, sharing with people this idea, stepping out of comfort, She steps into a creative and courageous culture, not a compliant one. That's rethinking in action. Do you understand how deliberate, how intentional that she had to be? She knew instinctively that it was best to keep it to herself. Maybe it was a little too far-fetched. Maybe it was too state-of-the-art. Her mind immediately did an audit and said, I don't know, this could go bad. But after pausing, reflecting, and exploring what her mind was saying, she decided to make a choice. She decided to be relational. She decided to step into that moment, and stepping into the opportunity of having a new life experience. So this week, listen for the voice in your head that says, that's not safe, that's not me. And ask yourself, is my mind protecting me? Or is this my fear pretending to be logical? Now think about that. The first one is very self-explaining. Is this my mind protecting me? Chances are yes. Or is this my fear pretending to be logical? And you may have never heard of that kind of thinking. Your fear pretending to be logical. Now, what's interesting about that is the opposite of fear is not directly courage. The opposite of fear is desire. So your fear has a tendency to express itself in a very convincing, logical way. It's best that we don't take a chance. It's best that we don't step out of our comfort zone. So, is this your mind protecting you? Is this your fear pretending to be logical? But then ask the better question. What might be possible if you responded with curiosity rather than caution? In a sense, that's giving yourself permission to be yourself. Giving yourself permission to exercise your identity, to trust in yourself, because no one knows you better than you know yourself. And even if you receive external validation that's off-putting, inferior, unpleasant, so what? Now what? Go back to being yourself. Check in with your instincts and ask yourself the better question. What would be possible if I responded with curiosity rather than caution? You don't have to leap off a cliff to challenge your mind. You just have to notice it and decide whether it's time you trust yourself or trust your instincts. But remember, sometimes those instincts can be quite outdated. Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink podcast. Remember, your mind is doing its job, but you don't have to let it run the show. When you think with connection in mind, you lead with purpose rather than protection. You open up space for a fuller, more meaningful life. And that could be just the outcome that you need, want, desire, and deserve. Your mind is not relational, it's self-protective. Allow your mind to do what it needs to do under certain circumstances. Trust your instincts at times, but then ask yourself who's in control, you or your mind. Follow the show on Apple or Spotify, or visit davidzierk.com for more insight and resources that help you rethink your patterns and reconnect with what matters most. Until next time, keep asking the better question, because that's how we grow stronger together.